I still remember the exact moment my parents said it out loud. Not shouted, not angrily, almost casually. We were sitting at the old wooden dining table, the same one with uneven legs that wobbled every time someone leaned too hard. The ceiling fan hummed above us, struggling against the summer heat. My father was reading the newspaper, my mother folding laundry beside him. I had rehearsed my words all day. "I'm thinking of buying a house," I said. The room went quiet. My father slowly lowered the newspaper and looked at me over his glasses. My mother stopped folding the shirt in her hands. They exchanged a look, one I'd seen many times before, a look that said, "Here he goes again." My father sighed. "Be realistic," he said. "People like us don't just buy houses." My mother added softly, "You should focus on paying your bills first." That was it. No encouragement, no curiosity, no questions, just a quiet dismissal. That night, I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling of my childhood bedroom, listening to the sound of traffic outside, and wondering if they were right. Because if I'm being honest, I didn't look like someone who could afford a house.
I was in my late 20s. No degree from a prestigious university, no fancy job title, no savings account that made bankers smile. Just a regular income that disappeared faster than it arrived. But what my parents didn't see, what no one saw, was the fire burning quietly inside me. I wasn't dreaming recklessly. I was planning. I grew up watching my parents work themselves to exhaustion. My father left before sunrise every morning and returned long after dark, his shoulders slumped, hands rough from years of labor. My mother stretched every rupee like it was made of gold, turning leftovers into new meals, fixing clothes instead of replacing them. They did everything right, and still we struggled. That's what scared them. Their doubt didn't come from cruelty, it came from experience. They had lived their whole lives believing one thing: dreams are dangerous. Stability is survival. So when I talked about buying a house, what they heard was risk. What I heard was destiny calling. The first rejection came from the bank. The loan officer smiled politely while tapping on her keyboard. "Your income isn't stable enough," she said. "Your credit history is thin. You need more savings." I nodded, thanked her, and walked out. The second bank didn't even pretend to consider it. The third laughed, not cruelly, but enough to sting. Every rejection chipped away at my confidence. Every no echoed my parents' voices in my head. "We told you so. You're aiming too high. People like us don't do this." But here's the truth no one talks about. Doubt is loudest when you're closest to something real. I started working more hours, then more, then nights. I took freelance jobs no one wanted, side gigs that paid little but taught me a lot. I cut expenses until my life looked empty on paper. No outings, no luxuries, no safety net. Friends stopped inviting me out. "Bro, you've changed," they said. They were right. I had. Every paycheck went into savings. Every mistake became a lesson. Every rejection became fuel. Still, progress was slow, painfully slow. Some nights I questioned everything. Was I selfish for dreaming bigger than my family ever had? Was I disrespecting my parents' sacrifices by wanting more? Then I'd remember my mother's tired hands, my father's bowed shoulders, and I'd whisper to myself, "This isn't rebellion, this is gratitude." One evening, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. "He'll get hurt," my mother said. "He's setting himself up for disappointment," my father replied. They didn't know I was listening. I didn't interrupt. I just stood there, absorbing every word, letting it sink deep into my bones. Because sometimes, pain sharpens focus better than motivation ever could. Months passed, then a year. My savings grew slowly, like a plant pushing through concrete. I reapplied. Another rejection, then another, until one day a different loan officer leaned back in his chair and said, "You're close, very close." That word, close, changed everything. I found the house on a quiet street I'd never noticed before. Nothing fancy, no grand entrance, just a small place with peeling paint and cracked tiles. But when I stepped inside, something clicked. Sunlight spilled through the windows like it belonged there. The walls felt patient, like they'd been waiting. I imagined my parents sitting at the table, my mother cooking without worrying about rent, my father resting without checking the clock. This wasn't just a house, it was a promise. When I told my parents I was trying again, they didn't argue. They just looked tired. "Don't break your heart," my mother said. I smiled. "I won't." The approval call came on an ordinary afternoon. I almost ignored it. When I answered and heard the words, "Your loan has been approved," my knees buckled. I sat on the floor, phone pressed to my ear, tears spilling before I could stop them. I didn't scream. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. For the first time in years, I breathed. I didn't tell my parents right away. I waited. I wanted the moment to mean something unforgettable. The morning I walked into that house with the keys in my hand, I felt like a stranger stepping into a dream. I held them tightly, twisting them around my fingers as if their metal weight could anchor reality to my hope. The air smelled faintly of old wood and dust, a mix of history and possibility. Every creak of the floorboards under my steps sounded like a drumbeat in my chest. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but imagining it and living it were worlds apart. When my parents arrived later that day, I could see the surprise etched across their faces. My father's eyes were narrow, cautious, as if he was trying to measure the truth behind what I said. My mother's hands instinctively went to her chest, a small, protective gesture she had made since I was a boy. "You did it?" my father asked, his voice quiet, almost unrecognizable. I nodded. I handed him one of the keys. His hands, rough and worn from years of labor, trembled ever so slightly. I could see the disbelief, the hesitation, the pride struggling to surface. You bought a house?" my mother whispered. "Yes," I said. "Our house, our home." For a few minutes, we just stood there. No words, just the quiet hum of possibility filling the space where doubt had lived for decades. And then the storm came. Not the weather, but the reality that dreams never come with warning labels. The first problem was financial. Hidden costs, fees I hadn't anticipated, urgent repairs that had to be done immediately, a leaking roof, broken locks, flickering lights. I realized quickly that owning a home was not the fairy tale I had envisioned. It was a battlefield disguised as stability. I worked days, nights, and weekends. Every extra hour meant a step closer to settling debts, paying contractors, and making the house feel like home. Exhaustion became my constant companion. Friends and colleagues asked if I was okay. I smiled and said, "Better than ever," even as my body screamed in protest. Then came the judgment, the silent one from the world around me. People who once praised my ambition now whispered behind my back. "He's lucky," some said. "She probably inherited it," others assumed. It didn't matter that I had scrimped, saved, and sacrificed everything. The world loves to underestimate. And I realized the only voice that mattered wasn't theirs, it was mine.
Every night, after finishing work on the house, I would sit on the porch, staring at the horizon, thinking about the voices that doubted me, especially my parents' voices from years ago. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was grateful. They had unknowingly given me the best motivation, a reason to prove that limits are just illusions. The next challenge was internal. Owning a house is supposed to bring peace, right? A sense of security? I found something different. Anxiety, pressure, the fear of failure. What if I couldn't maintain it? What if the payments piled up? What if, despite all my efforts, this dream collapsed like so many others before it? Sleep became fleeting. Nights stretched long as I wrestled with questions no one could answer but myself. And yet, I refused to stop. I reminded myself every morning, you've already survived the impossible. This is just another test. Then something unexpected happened. Something that transformed the way I viewed not just my home, but life itself. One evening, my father came into the living room holding a photo from years ago, a picture of me as a boy, grinning with a scraped knee and a bandage on my elbow. "I never imagined you'd do this," he said quietly. "I didn't believe it. I'm sorry for doubting you." I stared at him. I wanted to say 1,000 things, but words felt inadequate. Instead, I pulled him into a hug. It was awkward, heavy with years of unspoken tension, but real. My mother joined, placing her hand on my shoulder. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You've made us proud," she whispered. It was a turning point. The dream was no longer just mine. It had become ours. But life never lets a story run smoothly. A month later, a leak appeared in the ceiling. A faulty pipe caused water to drip through the living room. Contractors delayed repairs. Expenses surged. I felt the weight of responsibility like never before. For the first time, I doubted myself. Maybe my parents had been right. Maybe I had bitten off more than I could chew. Then I remembered something I had learned during all those rejections and nights of struggle. You don't give up on something because it's hard. You give up on it because you stop believing. I picked up my tools, fixed what I could, hired help for what I couldn't, and tackled every problem one step at a time. Exhaustion became resilience. Fear became focus. Every small victory reinforced the belief that I could weather storms, both literal and metaphorical. Word of my achievement spread quietly. Friends and colleagues began to notice. Some asked for advice, others came to see the house itself, marveling at how a small space could reflect such determination. But the most important lesson was this: owning a house wasn't about the building. It was about proving to yourself that you are capable of more than anyone, including yourself, believes. The house began to transform under my hands. Walls got fresh paint, broken furniture replaced, and the garden. The garden! I spent hours planting flowers, trimming bushes, and watching life sprout from the soil I had turned with my own hands. Every morning, sunlight spilling through the windows reminded me why I had persevered. Every evening, the quiet hum of the ceiling fan felt like applause for my persistence. And slowly, my parents' doubts faded, not completely, but enough to make room for pride, for wonder, for belief. It wasn't easy, it wasn't glamorous, it wasn't fast. It was real. It was mine. Months passed since I first held the keys. The house was no longer just walls and a roof. It was a reflection of persistence, of late nights, sacrifices, and quiet victories. But life has a way of testing whether lessons have truly been learned. One Friday morning, I woke up to an email that shook me. It was from a client I had worked with months ago, someone I had almost given up on.
They needed a large project completed in a week, one that would pay enough to cover my expenses for the next 3 months. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for, but it came at the worst possible time. The roof was leaking again, the garden was overgrown, bills were piling up. I barely had enough time to sleep, let alone take on a massive project. For a moment, I froze. I could see my parents' faces, my father, caution etched in every line, and my mother, worry sitting like a shadow over her eyes. It would have been so easy to give up, to walk away, to let circumstances dictate my life. But I remembered something my father once said, years before I dreamed of owning a house. You only know what you're capable of when you face something impossible. That phrase echoed in my mind like a drumbeat, and so I said yes. The next 7 days were some of the hardest of my life. I woke before sunrise, I worked on the project until my hands ached, typing and calculating and negotiating. Between tasks, I patched the ceiling, repainted walls, and mowed the garden. I skipped meals, I forgot what sleep felt like. Yet, amid the chaos, something extraordinary happened. I realized that challenges don't just test us, they teach us. Every pipe I fixed, every wall I painted, every spreadsheet I managed simultaneously strengthened not just my skills, but my confidence. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving in adversity. The 7th day arrived. Exhausted, I submitted the project. My client was stunned by the quality, amazed at the speed, and rewarded me beyond my expectations. For the first time, I felt the tangible fruits of my labor. It wasn't luck, it wasn't chance, it was grit, determination, and belief. I could finally breathe. That evening, I invited my parents to see the house. I had prepared something special. We walked through the rooms, and I pointed out the improvements, the repairs, the little touches that made it feel like home. And then I led them to the living room. I handed them a small envelope. Inside were the first mortgage statement paid entirely from my earnings, along with a note. We did it. This is ours. Every challenge, every late night, every doubt, it led us here. My mother's hands shook. My father's eyes glistened. They didn't speak for a moment, just absorbed the reality of the life we had built. Finally, my father said, I underestimated you. I was wrong. My mother added, we should have believed in you sooner. I smiled. It's not about belief anymore, it's about action. Dreams require action. That night, as we sat together, I realized something profound. Owning the house was never the real victory. The real victory was the transformation of me, of my parents, of our mindset. We had gone from doubt to trust, from fear to hope, from survival to creation. I understood, deeply, that success isn't just what you accomplish, it's who you become in the process. The story didn't end there. Neighbors began noticing the changes. What was once a small, overlooked house on a quiet street became a place of light and life. People started asking questions. How did I do it? How did I manage? And every time someone doubted themselves, I remembered the words I had learned the hard way. The only limits that matter are the ones you accept. I also started helping others. I mentored friends, colleagues, and even strangers who were struggling to reach their goals. I shared the lessons of perseverance, patience, and courage. I taught them that failure is not a stop sign, it's a stepping stone. This wasn't about pride, it was about paying forward the lessons that had saved me from giving up. Life continued, as it always does. Some days were smooth, some days were stormy. But the storms no longer scared me. They were just part of the journey. And the house, our house, stood as proof that dreams, no matter how impossible they seem, can be achieved when determination meets opportunity. Just when I thought the worst had passed, life reminded me that victory is never permanent, and every dream comes with its own trials. It started with a call late one night. "Hello, this is the contractor. There's a problem with the foundation. It's worse than we thought. Repairs will cost double what we expected." I froze. My hands tightened around the phone. My heart raced. After months of hard work, after every sacrifice, was it all going to collapse? I remember sitting on the porch, staring at the empty street, letting the weight of reality sink in. The house, our dream, was suddenly under threat. Every pipe, every wall, every corner I had repaired felt fragile under the looming disaster. I thought back to the first time my parents doubted me, to every "you can't" whispered by family, friends, and even strangers. It would have been easy to fold, to quit, to let the dream slip through my fingers, but giving up had never been an option. I spent days analyzing every possibility. Could I afford the repairs? Could I find a cheaper solution without compromising safety? Could I negotiate with contractors, banks, anyone willing to help? Sleep became a memory. I worked tirelessly, juggling freelance projects and fixing the house simultaneously. Friends called, concerned. "Why do you do this to yourself?" they asked. I didn't answer. I only knew that if I gave up now, all those years of struggle would be meaningless. I realized something crucial. Life doesn't test you when you're weak, it tests you when you've grown strong. The repair process was grueling. The foundation was worse than the contractor initially believed. Water had seeped into the walls, weakening parts of the structure. Hidden damages were uncovered day after day. Every time a problem was solved, two more appeared. I was exhausted, physically and emotionally. Doubt tried to creep back in. The voices of naysayers, long silenced, tried to return. "See, you were never ready. This is too much for you." But I had learned a truth through every rejection, every sleepless night, every obstacle. Challenges are not meant to stop you. They are meant to reveal your strength. During this time, my parents became my anchor. My mother cooked meals and left them at the door while I worked. She encouraged me quietly. No lectures, no doubts, just faith. My father stayed late in the evenings, helping me move supplies, carrying heavy tools, even learning a few fixes himself. I saw a transformation in them too. Their doubts melted into pride, their fear replaced by belief. I realized something I hadn't understood before. The journey of one person's dream can heal and uplift those around them. Weeks turned into months. There were moments I thought I couldn't go on. One night, as rain poured outside and water seeped through a partially repaired roof, I sat on the wet floor, drenched and exhausted. I closed my eyes and asked myself, why am I doing this? The answer came, quiet but clear. Because giving up is never the answer. Because dreams are bigger than fear. Because I've come too far to stop now. I redoubled my efforts. I negotiated prices, worked extra freelance jobs, learned more repair skills than I ever imagined possible. Slowly, methodically, the house began to stabilize. The leaks stopped. The foundation was reinforced. The walls stood firm. The garden bloomed again. Every victory, no matter how small, reminded me of one thing. Resilience is not about avoiding challenges, it's about facing them,
again and again, without losing hope. By the time the repairs were complete, the house was more than a dream fulfilled. It was a symbol of endurance, of grit, of the refusal to let life's storms dictate your story. And just when I thought the lesson was complete, life threw one final test. A financial setback threatened to wipe out months of savings. A delayed payment from a client, combined with unexpected medical bills, made me question whether I could stay afloat. I felt fear, real fear, the kind that tightens your chest and keeps you awake at night. But instead of panicking, I faced it. I broke down every number, planned meticulously, reached out to lenders, renegotiated deadlines, and found solutions I didn't know existed. It was grueling, exhausting, but by facing the problem head on, I emerged stronger, smarter, and more prepared for anything life could throw at me. The turning point wasn't the money. It wasn't the repairs. It was the realization. Nothing can stop you if you refuse to quit. Nothing can define your limits except you. I looked around the house one quiet evening, the walls now standing firm, the garden glowing in the golden sunlight, and I understood something profound. This home, this dream, wasn't just mine. It was a testament to persistence, courage, and the power of belief. And when my parents walked in, seeing the home fully restored, I finally heard words I never thought I'd hear. "You've done what we thought impossible." Tears glistened in my mother's eyes. My father nodded, silently, proudly, almost reverently. I realized then that the real victory wasn't in owning a house. It was in proving that belief, action, and persistence can move mountains.
The day finally arrived when everything I had worked for, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every doubt I had overcome, culminated in one simple, unforgettable moment. I had cleaned the house from top to bottom. The walls gleamed. The floors reflected the sunlight streaming through the windows. The garden bloomed as if it knew a victory had been won. I set the coffee mugs on the table, adjusted the chairs, and waited. I wanted my parents to see the home not as it was when I had first bought it, or even as it had been during repairs, but as a symbol of every obstacle we had conquered together. When my parents arrived, they hesitated at the doorway. Their eyes widened, taking in the space as if seeing it for the first time. This is ours?" my mother whispered. I smiled. Yes. Every corner, every wall, every brick, it's ours. But more than that, it's proof that nothing can stop us if we refuse to quit. My father stepped inside and ran his hand along the table. The same old table we had eaten countless meals at, now polished, clean, and sturdy. He looked at me with a mixture of pride and disbelief. "You've changed everything," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You've made the impossible real." I handed them the keys. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. "This," I said, "is more than a house. It's a reminder that we can do anything we set our minds to." For a few minutes, none of us spoke. Only the quiet hum of the ceiling fan, the sunlight bouncing off the walls, and the soft scent of flowers from the garden filled the room. And then, almost ceremoniously, my mother took the keys in her hands and turned them slowly. My father's hand rested on her shoulder. They looked at me, then at each other, and smiled. The kind of smile that carries decades of pride, relief, and hope all at once. It was the moment every dreamer waits for, that moment when the impossible becomes reality,
That moment when your efforts, your sacrifices, and your persistence are validated, not by the world, but by the people who mean the most. After that day, life didn't suddenly become perfect. Challenges still arose, bills still needed paying, repairs still demanded attention, but none of it felt overwhelming anymore. I had faced storms far bigger than any individual problem. I had learned that success isn't a destination, it's a mindset. Owning that house taught me lessons no classroom ever could. That doubt is temporary, but belief is permanent. That obstacles are invitations, not roadblocks. That hard work, persistence, and courage will always create results, even when no one is watching. And most importantly, that proving yourself to yourself matters more than proving anything to anyone else. Friends, strangers, and even neighbors began asking about the journey. I shared the story openly, the failures, the rejections, the nights of doubt, and the triumphs. People were inspired. Comments poured in. Messages arrived.
I've been doubted by my family. This gives me hope. I thought I could never achieve my dream. You proved me wrong. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been told you can't. And every time someone thanked me for sharing my story, I remembered the first moment my parents doubted me at that wobbly dining table. How far we had come, how powerful persistence could be. And then, one quiet evening, I sat alone at that table. I placed the keys in the center and just stared at them. The metal felt heavy with memories, the nights of anxiety and exhaustion, the months of repairs and setbacks, the years of doubt from those I loved most. And yet, the keys also felt light, light with achievement, light with possibility, light with a future that was no longer limited by fear or circumstance. I realized then that this story, this journey, was bigger than a house. It was about the human spirit, about dreaming, about fighting, about never letting anyone else's doubt define your destiny.